Ja, vielen herzlichen Dank. Ich möchte nun den Moderator des heutigen Vormittags vorstellen, Klaus-Stefan Otto. Er ist Mitglied des Vorstands des Forums Ziviler Friedensdienste und wird das Gespräch einleiten, glaube ich, wie mir scheint, mit einem Interview mit Frederik de Klerk, stellvertretend für die an den Wiener Friedensgesprächen teilnehmenden Friedensnobelpreisträger.
Ja, von mir auch einen guten Tag zu dieser Veranstaltung. Wir haben uns überlegt, wie wir diese Veranstaltung interessant machen können. Und wir wollen hier ein Podium machen, wo wir ins Gespräch miteinander kommen wollen. Wir hatten Frederik de Klerk auch gebeten, mit auf dieses Podium zu kommen. Er muss leider früher gehen. Und deswegen haben wir gesagt, wir wollen einfach nochmal die Möglichkeit nutzen, ihn zu hören und dieses Gespräch vorzuziehen. Die an den Gesprächen teilgenommen haben, haben gemerkt, dass bei den Teilnehmern zum Teil etwas Müdigkeit aufgekommen ist, wenn wieder eine Erklärung abgegeben wird. Und deswegen wollen wir es etwas anders machen und wollen es in Form eines Gespräches machen. Ich glaube, dass für uns alle wichtig ist die Erfahrung aus Südafrika. Lange Zeit war es so, dass Europa auf Südafrika geguckt hat, geschaut hat auf diesen Unruheherd mit einer gewissen Selbstgefälligkeit. Wir sind jetzt in einer Situation, wo wir keinen Anlass für diese Selbstgefälligkeit mehr haben, weil ungefähr eine Flugstunde von wir entfernt es Krieg gegeben hat und es immer noch eine sehr kriegerische Situation ist. Und von daher sind wir in einer Position, wo es wichtig ist zu hören, was wir auch hier in Europa von Afrika lernen können. Und das ist eigentlich der Punkt für unser Gespräch. Diese ganzen Gespräche, die Konfliktlösung, die dort beispielhaft passiert ist, was glauben Sie, was sind wichtige Erfahrungen für Sie gewesen, die Sie uns weitergeben wollen, auch hier in Europa, vielleicht auch insgesamt in der Welt?
Thank you very much. May I at the beginning say that I'm sorry that I can't stay for the full duration of the conference. I've learned a lot. I want to thank everybody. It was a privilege to participate, and I take back with me good experiences which will also serve me well when I launch a foundation shortly, which will have more of an African focus, but aimed at promoting peace and reconciliation, aimed at promoting multi-party democracy, and aimed at mobilizing civil society. I think that from our experience there are some lessons which might have international application. The first prerequisite for our success was that the parties to the conflict had to make a paradigm shift in their thinking. We, who've been governing South Africa from 1948, had to admit to ourselves that we have failed to bring justice to the majority of all South Africans. We wanted to build a little Europe with a country on the basis of nationality for each of the black nations, the Zulus, the Xhosas, the Tswanas, there are actually 9 of them, and one for the whites. And we wanted to build something like the European Union between those 10 states, 11 states. But the majority of blacks said, we don't want our freedom and our political rights that way. And our geographic and demographic and economic realities made it impossible to succeed because the interdependence between all our people, black and white, has become inextricable and totally interwoven. So we had to make the paradigm shift of saying, but where we've ended, notwithstanding maybe the moral defensibility of the idea of building a little Europe, is that we have failed to do so, and we're a minority governing for all practical purposes over a majority. And that was morally indefensible. The ANC had to make a paradigm shift. They had to make the paradigm shift of admitting that they can never win the struggle through the methods they were using, through the barrel of a gun and through the planting of bombs and through using terrorist methods. They had to admit that the only way in which we can prevent South Africa being totally destroyed in this conflict was to change the attitude, to come and sit down around the table and negotiate. Second lesson, there must be give and take. You must work for win-win situations. If parties enter negotiations with a view to walk away with a victory, you can't get lasting and sound settlements. There must be great concessions from both sides, and in the end, both sides must be somewhat disappointed with the results. Third lesson that I've learned is as important to take your own constituency along. You have to spend as much time in mobilizing your power base to support you for what you do. Otherwise, quite soon, as a negotiator, you find yourself rejected by your own people. And I spent lots of time on this. Last few remarks, we learned that timing is very important. We learned that personalities play a very important role. Apart from the leading personalities, apart from me and Mandela, who had to develop a chemistry, although we had lots of fights and at times our relationship was terribly bad. But we were always able to rise above that when we met a dead end. But it was equally important that in our negotiating teams, personal relationships had to develop between some of our spokespeople and some of our backroom planners and advisors, so that when the debate in the real negotiation got too hot, we could refer it to people who have developed an understanding and who could come back to us with options which would open a door again and which would take us forward. Those are a few of our experiences which I think are of international relevance.
Vielen Dank. Für mich ist sehr deutlich geworden, dass wahrscheinlich gerade dieser Punkt, die eigene Partei, die eigene Gruppe dazu zu bekommen, mitzumachen, diesen Weg, dass das wahrscheinlich auch der Punkt ist, der wirklich die meiste Kraft auch fordert. Ich finde, Sie haben es sehr, sehr wirksam zusammengefasst, diese Punkte, und ich glaube, für uns Europäer sind viele Punkte, wo wir nachdenken können, was das, was Sie gesagt haben, für uns zum Beispiel in diesem Konflikt Kosovo-Balkan, Ex-Jugoslawien bedeutet. Sie haben davon gesprochen, Organisationen müssen sich verändern, ihr Paradigma praktisch verändern. Das ist aber eigentlich der zweite Schritt, weil der erste Schritt ist, dass die Menschen oder einzelne Menschen in dieser Organisation in ihrem Bewusstsein eine Veränderung durchführen müssen, weil nur dann kann der zweite Schritt erfolgen. Was ist bei Ihnen persönlich eigentlich so der wichtige Punkt gewesen, wo Sie den Eindruck haben, dass da diese Veränderung stattgefunden hat bei Ihnen?
Thank you for that question. I welcome it for one specific reason. In our panel discussion group yesterday, one of the participants, for whom I have the greatest respect, gave me quite a lecture on how important it is that leaders must tell their followers what to do. That is more or less, I want to tell him what I did in South Africa. Because what I decided to do wasn't popular. You ask me what happened in my own heart and how did I come to reach that point. Let me immediately say I did not have a Damascus Road experience, where one evening I went to bed and I still firmly believed in the old policy, and the next morning I got up and said it's all wrong. It was for me and all the fellow leaders in our party a process which was accelerated by my predecessor, who in his very first speech when he became the leader in 1978 said, "We must adapt or die." And he did a lot of groundwork in preparing the scene for change. As a young minister, I was appointed in cabinet in 1978. We then I served on a small cabinet committee. And the task of that committee was to say, we must change. How must we change? And we worked, and after a period of 2-3 years, the first constitutional changes emanated from this. We changed our constitution. We brought in a 3-chamber parliament. We brought the people of mixed origin, the coloreds and the Indians, into the mainstream of politics, into parliament, and even into the cabinet. That caused the far-right wing of our party to break away. And that liberated us, because suddenly we didn't have to spend as much time to keep the disgruntled element in our party happy. They were gone, and we could move much faster. This cabinet committee then worked, and if I have to say a formal moment where the change was actually solidified, was in August 1986. The National Party called a conference of all its leaders at grassroots level, some 600 people, and on our recommendations, formally abandoned the policy of separate development, as we called apartheid. Decided we're not going to tinker with this, we're not going to just make changes. That was the paradigm shift. We abandoned the policy and substituted a new vision. We didn't abandon it and create a vacuum, but substituted a new vision of one united South Africa with one citizenship, with one man, one vote, with all forms of discrimination to be eradicated, but with the effective protection of our many cultural minorities. And it was on that vision that I could build my action plan when I became president, to say, now we had the vision. My predecessor failed to put that vision into effect, and to motivate my power base, the broad leadership of my party, so that they felt it was also their decision, not just mine. So no moment, no great moment which I can say on that day, of that month, of that year, something very special happened to me. But much of the change, I want to emphasize, was not because of outside pressure. In '86, when we abandoned the policy, we were doing very well against sanctions. We were doing very well in the armed struggle. We were, through a successful state of emergency, we've limited the number of incidents. We really had a good grip on security. So we took the decision primarily on a basis of conscience, on looking at ourselves and on saying to ourselves, but what you are now doing and where you are is morally indefensible. You cannot build the future on injustice. The time has come for a paradigm shift.
Yeah. Eine letzte Frage noch, die vielleicht viele hier interessiert im Raum. Sie haben mit Mandela zusammen lange Zeit im Rampenlicht gestanden, jetzt weniger. Wie ist im Moment so Ihre Beziehung und Ihr Verhältnis zu Mandela?
He has retired now, I have retired. We're no longer active political opponents fighting each other for a share of the vote. When I retired, I went to see him. He was then still president, and it was a very warm meeting that we've had. I've had another follow-up meeting where I informed him of my plans to promote reconciliation and to start with a foundation. He was very supportive, and we left each other on the note that we must have lunch together with our wives, who happen to know each other. And at the moment, my secretary and his secretary is looking for such a date. I want us, me and President Mandela, to take care of that which we have started in a very constructive sense. And I'm convinced that we will be seen together in the future, making the same plea for continued reconciliation and continued strengthening of our democracy. We've never become intimate friends. We've never dropped in on each other just for a chat and a whiskey or a beer. But there has developed between us, I think, although at times he has attacked me very viciously, but a basic respect and regard, and when we don't talk politics, there is warmth between us.
Vielen Dank für diese sehr persönlichen Worte. Ich glaube, dass es sehr inspirierend war für uns, diese sehr persönlichen Erfahrungen zu hören. Und ich denke, wir sollten sehr viel darüber nachdenken, was das auch für uns in Europa in dieser Situation bedeutet. Und ich glaube, dass das, was Sie beide dort in Südafrika gemacht haben, für uns sehr inspirierend gewesen ist. Vielen Dank, dass Sie gekommen sind und gute Reise.